Testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is an interview with Professor Arthur Brownlea for the Griffith University Jubilee History, taped at Griffith on Monday, 19th of March 1996 with Dr. Norbert. Professor Brownlea, if I could ask you to just indicate, give me a very brief biographical background or bio, and possibly just indicate to me how you came to join Griffith, why and when, and I suppose what you've done since and why you stayed with Griffith all the time and what evolutionary changes you've seen in the place since you first came.
Okay. Well, I'm Arthur Brownlea. I took up my position as Foundation Professor in the School of Australian Environmental Studies in January 1974. I was interviewed for the position in January 1973 after returning from study leave in California. I was offered the position and accepted that. I still had a year to run at Macquarie, and that's significant because I went to Macquarie because Macquarie was the first of the universities to tackle interdisciplinary approaches to university education. I was in the School of Earth Sciences. My background was in geography, but I had pioneered medical geography in this country. I was also very interested in population studies, in environmental impact assessment. I'd been involved in the first environmental impact assessments in New South Wales, and I could see links between quite a range of disciplines, the country's environmental dilemmas, the need to develop policies, community education and participation in environmental problem solving. As a geographer, I had training in soil chemistry, in geomorphology, in agricultural geography, as well as urban and town planning. I had a quantitative background, having studied statistics at Sydney University, an economics background, a geography background, a history background, and I had always been interested in the policy environment. I had worked with governments in New South Wales, with local governments. I'd been involved in community consultation for many years. Griffith provided me with a developmental opportunity that Macquarie had begun. Griffith was in some ways the next stage of interdisciplinary problem-based learning and teaching beyond the Macquarie situation. We had seen a lot of the problem-based learning interdisciplinary study at Green Bay, Wisconsin, which was one of the models that was considered in the development of academic frameworks and paradigms at Griffith. I was joined Calvin Rose as the founding head of the school, chair of the school, I think we called them in those days. Calvin's background was in engineering, in soil physics, the applications in agriculture, and the development of interdisciplinary approaches to soil and natural landscape problems. We therefore complemented each other. And I remember at our first meeting at my home in Sydney after I was offered the position, we came together very quickly around four key concepts. One, a systems approach to the study of environmental concerns. Two, an evidentiary base for the study of environmental problems, which meant strong field work plus strong data gathering, data analysis, computing, stats, and all the things that followed on from that. And the fourth element was a strong interdisciplinary linkage between the social behavioural sciences and what's called the natural or the physical-based sciences. It was therefore very easy for us to see an ecosystem framework, a human ecology paradigm coming together with a strong field, laboratory, community intersection. My understanding is that this represented the first of its kind in undergraduate education. It represented the first 3-year program at undergraduate level in environmental studies. Why did I accept? A, because I was at heart an interdisciplinarian. Second, because I saw the future in environmental problem solving as requiring not only technical skills but social skills, not only the physical but also the social, not only the work of academics but also community participation. And we did talk in those early days about the development of an environmental arts program which would skill communities in participation in environmental problem solving and decision making. Why did I stay? Because Griffith offered me the opportunity of continuing to grow in the development of knowledge in environmental areas, and also enabled me to develop strong links with public sector decision making, community participation, the development of a social justice approach to environmental problem solving, and also the development of health ecology, which took health away from a disease-based paradigm into a social health construct. It brought together things like environmental factors, lifestyle factors, political processes, community decision-making, epidemiology, and human biology. It was in those later years that I developed an interest in and an involvement in genetic manipulation, decision-making in this country, the release of genetically modified organisms into the Australian environment and into our own human food chains, and subsequently ethical issues associated with gene therapy.
That's fine. Can you give me a brief sort of progression from what you did and how AES developed over the years as it started off to be, and then where you moved through AES and on to other areas? Is that a fair?
Well, yes, I suppose once the foundation program in AES was established, our main task was to develop areas of concentration or concentrated studies. And it took a few years for these to emerge as we added staff. But eventually, a strong emphasis on resources and land use, a strong emphasis on ecosystems, a strong emphasis on quantitative methods, which eventually grew to include qualitative methods as the social sciences concentration area built up, and these were the main areas. Then we had land use, resources, ecosystems, we had pollution studies, and we had the social sciences. Within that framework, I was able to develop the environmental health stream, or the health ecology stream, which brought together in the final year studies in ecology, environmental pollution, epidemiology, and human health. And out of that health interest, we were able to grow a program in public and community and environmental health. And for a period of about 8 years, I negotiated an arrangement between the University of Queensland, Queensland University of Technology, Griffith, a master's program offered by the 3 institutions in public health. This was the first of its kind in the country and is still a model for inter-institutional collaboration in postgraduate public health education. Yes. It's been going for about 5 or 6 years, so it's about 1990, 1991. About 1990 that may well have started, but it took 8 years to negotiate. In addition to that, I had a series of doctoral students completing their doctorates in occupational health and safety. And it was time, with the broad range of interests in occ health and safety in commerce and administration and in ENS, for us to think about a school of occupational health and safety. And eventually the university agreed to establish that. I became its first head, and we launched that about 3 years ago, maybe 1993. Can't give you the exact date. And that launch was in the Parliamentary Annex and was launched by the Minister for Industry and a range of other things he was Minister for, Matt Foley.
Oh, yes, I know Matt, but...
Yes, okay. But in the meantime, there was a strong interest in CAD, in the development of behavioural sciences with a strong organisational psychology focus, and my own interest in occupational health and safety. And it was decided that we could bring those things together around a common theme of change agency. So we developed a bachelor's degree in behavioural science that combined psychology, change agency, and occupational health and safety. And that led eventually to the creation of a Faculty of Health and Behavioural Sciences to complement what was done in environmental science, which had more of a pollution ecology base, with the organisational and change agency base, behavioural science base, that could be offered in the Faculty of Health and Behavioural Sciences. I was the interim dean, given the responsibility of establishing that new faculty. And it was at that time that we were discussing a school of nursing, a nursing program, and I was involved in the design of that curriculum and was a strong advocate for it to be a problem-based learning program, and for its location within a behavioural science framework rather than a laboratory-based science framework. This had come out of my experience in community health and also my work in the that I had done in research with a wide range of nursing people, nursing academics. Nursing was located in the Faculty of Health and Behavioural Sciences. Then, at this time, there were the Dawkins Reforms, and I was able to engage the School of Leisure Studies at Mount Gravatt in a productive relationship with the Faculty of Health and Behavioural Sciences. They decided to join us in that common venture, so that the Faculty of Health and Behavioural Sciences began with a behavioural science degree, then added nursing, and added a leisure studies program. At the same time as we were beginning the Faculty of Health and Behavioural Sciences, I was aware that leisure studies had an interest in rehabilitation, education had an interest in rehab, and I also had an interest in rehabilitation and disability studies. So HBS collaborated with education in developing a postgraduate diploma and master's program in rehabilitation. And that's now managed solely within HBS. And that program has worked very well, and it was negotiated and developed with the professionals and with public sector agencies, and had a lot of support from CRS. They helped us very much in that early stage with the release of a senior officer from CRS to help us build that program. So we are strongly indebted to CRS for those beginnings and to those professionals that helped us design the program. That has led us, within this faculty, to grow into an even broader stream of human services. And we are beginning programs now at the graduate level in human services. We look to Logan for the development of a bachelor's program in human services, within which streams like disability and rehabilitation studies will be a strong element.
Right, now that's excellent. Thanks, Professor Brownlea. Can I go back now and ask you how you saw the philosophy, which you've touched on, I know, and to the degree you wish to elaborate on that or just leave it, and how you see the philosophy of the university has developed from Professor Willett's time as Vice-Chancellor through the present time of Professor Webb. And has there been a lot of change? What has been gained? What has been lost? That's it.
Yes. The original Griffith philosophy emphasized interdisciplinarity, team approaches to teaching and learning, relevance to contemporary societal problems and concerns and challenges, and also a problem-based approach to learning. There is still much of that left within Griffith. But Griffith, like other universities, has had to respond to a variety of quite dynamic external pressures that increasingly place emphasis on competencies, credentials, employability, and disciplinarity. The terminology that we use to describe our units of learning and how they were coupled together has had, for the sake of national homogeneity or uniformity, particularly for information gathering and profile description, changed so that we express ourselves in much more traditional classical university terms than perhaps we would have if the external pressures had been different than what they'd been. There is a particular challenge in Griffith, as I see it, to retain societal relevance, problem-based learning, team teaching, with the structures that have emerged to assist us in managing our mission. It's very difficult to bring people together in a problem-based, across school, across faculty endeavour when the structures and the incentives for doing so are not always fully flexible and resourceful enough. It's often easier with today's work pressures in universities to tackle the simplest of the issues and concerns rather than develop an appropriate response to the more complex. Yet there are still strong commitments within Griffith to complex problem solving, to interdisciplinarity.
Right.
The other concern is the professionalisation of education and the marketability of graduates. I remember the early days at Griffith where we had to explain to people what an environmental scientist was, and that our graduates didn't do Chemistry 1, Chemistry 2, Chemistry 3. Yet we did that. I remember the times when there was no professional organisation for environmental scientists, so we built one. And this meant that we had a faith in the way we were reconceptualising how knowledge was to be developed and how knowledge could be applied in non-traditional ways, not to compete with the traditional, but to complement it. And I think one of the challenges that we still face at Griffith is being different and being valued for being different, rather than serving what might be seen as a purely competency functionalist approach, where employment and market factors determine the product rather than the way we challenge current intellectual and professional paradigms.
You're covering a large number of the areas, but excellently, thanks. What would you say is the Griffith image, was the Griffith image when you first came here, and what is it now? And is this an area that has created problems for the university over the years, as some people have indicated to me it has done?
Because Griffith started out, and I've mentioned this just a moment or two ago, because Griffith started out being different yet complementary, as providing an alternative to traditional university education. It therefore had an enormous marketing problem. Potential employers, for example, found it difficult to read our transcripts, our testamas, because subjects had different kinds of names, and folk combined very different disciplinary backgrounds around problems. And the employers were graduates of fairly traditional universities. Many of them took our graduates on because of something that John Willett used to say that captured our imagination. John Willett challenged the old, what do you call those sayings? Jack of all trades and master of none was a cliche. We challenged that and proved that to be wrong, because we could be jack of all trades, even though that's not politically correct anymore, and master of one. And that was our essential model. Certainly in environmental studies, what we were able to do was help students develop insight, knowledge, skills, and practice in a wide variety of relevant disciplines, and through their concentration studies, develop expertise and depth in one. Now, that was the way environmental problems could be tackled. We needed people who could bring knowledge together from a variety of perspectives and synthesize it, and identify what could be done on that evidentiary base, given social realities. And that enhanced their employability, but it took 5 to 10 years to achieve that. Now, when you look at the Griffith Graduate is more employable now because employers can see multiple dimensions to their education, not just one. And our people are highly employable, particularly in occupational health and safety, because they combine many disciplines and appreciate the contribution of different disciplines. So that the market has shifted from traditional specializations and disciplinary priorities through to an appreciation that the market and the nature of jobs change, and that having a multi-skilled person across a range of disciplines with the capacity to enter a problem at a range of different points now increases their employability.
Is it also true, though, and I notice you've stressed, and I accept entirely what you say, the difference but complementary element of the university. At the same time, having spoken to people through a number of different schools, disciplines, faculties, not disciplines, is there not a valid perception that in some areas the aim was not just to complement but to supplant? Did this reality or perception create problems with any other academic institutions over the years?
I think supplant is too strong a word.
Right.
What we were trying to do was to say that society had the need for two kinds of knowledge. One was the knowledge that went deeply into a particular discipline, but also the knowledge of systems that brought those disciplinary contributions together and saw them in their proper relationship to each other. We needed not only institutions that were highly regarded in those disciplinary approaches, but institutions that had researched the synthesis, researched from a plural perspective, had developed that to a very high order, so that complementing meant recognizing the value of this other approach. Simply developing a knowledge of the toxicology of a particular health hazard does not lead automatically to its adoption in the political, industrial, and social realm as a problem that needs to be tackled, needs to be resourced, needs to be implemented and evaluated. And this is what Griffith was offering the Australian tertiary world. Excellence in that area. Not to supplant, but to take its proper place alongside.
And you would suggest that it took approximately 5 years for at least employers
to begin to see what we were trying to do.
What about the broader community? Have they yet fully understood this, do you think?
I don't believe so. I don't believe so. I think the broader community is increasingly seeing employment in credentialist terms, like an engineer or a lawyer or a doctor or a dentist, which represents yesterday's definitions of societal needs and their solutions. Leading edge organisations continually redefine where they are at and who they need and what will take them into the next 5 years. They continually stress the capacity for self-management. They continually stress the need for knowledge development. They continually challenge the theoretical underpinnings of their enterprise. This suggests to me a new kind of lifelong learner that isn't hobbled by yesterday's professional definitions. So there is a place for Griffith.
Indeed. And to what degree, over the 20 years of teaching, 25 years of existence, has Griffith impacted on the way other tertiary institutions operate, if at all? What impact has it had on the tertiary scene? And secondly, what impact do you think it has, in addition to what you just mentioned about employer perceptions on the general community? Even though I realise you said that the community don't fully understand it, has it had an impact in any way on the general community?
There was a mythology abroad that Griffith developed creative ideas which other institutions, by virtue of their size and diversity, were able to implement more readily than Griffith itself could. For example, it was Griffith, most recently, that was talking about alternative entries from a social and behavioural science degree into medicine. In fact, John Willett's idea that he and I and a number of others, a small number of others, talked about redefining the medical curriculum as a two-part program that was initiated through the study of the social and behavioural sciences and then into medicine, that we recaptured about 4 or 5 years ago and began talking about medicine as a postgraduate program that actually triggered the University of Queensland to think about it when we actually proposed doing it.
Right. What were you at all involved in an attempt to introduce medicine in the 70s? Could you just give me a bit of, that's one of the things I have a note that I'm going to catch up with the files on that, but perhaps you could give me a brief.
Griffith proposed a medical program based on the social and behavioural sciences with a strong community emphasis to challenge the paradigm that said medicine was based on a knowledge of physics, chemistry, and biology. We were also interested in an alternative then to the Queensland Medical School that said we would complement as a viable alternative the science-based approach that was at the University of Queensland, and perhaps the disease-oriented approach, and take a much more social community approach to medicine. We tried to get government support for that, but the politics of medical education gave priority to a Townsville concept rather than a Brisbane-based concept. And this was at a time when the introduction of some social and behavioural science into the medical school was being considered, some additional subjects in their first year.
And
we didn't succeed.
And that was looking also at the new QE2 hospital here.
It was looking to QE2 hospital, yes.
So, very briefly then, that issue was, as you said, what you wanted to do, and it had a hospital here that might have lent itself to doing that,
yes.
Still complement the University of Queensland, which were just beginning to think in terms of introducing some social and community elements to their medical degree, but politically it fell between the cracks or whatever.
Yes.
Okay, that's I wasn't expecting to talk about that now, but I appreciate it.
Right. Yes.
The amalgamations, were they necessary, and how successful have they been?
They were necessary politically. If you didn't amalgamate, then you would have funding problems. There may well have been some choice, but the political imperative was almost irresistible.
Right.
Griffith also had discussions. My recollection is that we had discussions with a merger with Mount Gravatt long before the Dawkins proposals.
Yes.
So that one went relatively smoothly.
Yes. I suppose I'm asking too, from the perspective of where you were at the time, did the amalgamations impact upon you? And to what degree would you support the view that I've heard from others, that it's a flash in the pan, we will return to being or we will become a boutique university eventually in one way or another, and that all we're doing is reducing our research capability and our funding, and these people will probably go with a lot of the money that's been put into them anyway. Particularly, of course, this refers to the Gold Coast.
Well, it is not impossible to combine excellence and diversity. And it's not impossible to overcome historical differences and varied expectations and aspirations. And while people see value in terms of resource sharing, the appreciation of different perspectives on things, we can hold it all together. That requires intellectual, research, social, cultural, and political support, and fair dealing with regard to budgeting. The kind of structures that we had at Griffith at its beginning that allowed us to innovate and to derive satisfaction from that and to feel current and valued and somewhat radical and experimental should be the characteristics of the way organisations, having been cobbled together, should learn to grow. The geographic distances that separate the various parts of Griffith as it's composed at the moment, given today's technologies, mobilities, and so on, need not be an insurmountable problem. Insurmountabilities arise when politics become more important than a shared intellectual endeavour. And that can be the politics of a discipline, the politics of a group, or the politics of a locality.
Or a person. What would you describe as some of the watersheds in the university? Are we running out of time?
We're getting close, but go on.
Okay, well, when you're ready, no.
Yeah. There have been the watersheds.
Yes, what would you say would be the watersheds, particularly from your perspective as a scientist?
These are the big transitions.
Yes.
Well,
I mean, you to interpret that as loosely as you wish.
yes. The first, let me think about the transitions. The first transition was staffing the first programs. When we reached we'd all gathered together, right? So that we had degree programs going. We'd come through that first stage and the first graduates were out. That was the first key transition, because then we were able to look on our products, have them tested in the market, get feedback from employers. We could take a breath from the race to get it all done and reflect. And that reflection was generally pretty good. But the resourcing honeymoon was just about over. Right? We then had the hard slog to develop reputation, which took us probably another 5 to 10 years. So it brought us to the edge of the 90s. And in that period, we were building up a research profile. We were building up understanding in employers as to what our graduates were. We had developed our first array of postgraduate PhD programs. We had restructured in a number of different ways to meet a changing mandate. And then we moved into the world of the merger. And the world of the merger, accelerating change, unmanageability, challenges to the theory that underpinned us, the emergence of a new kind of vision, national competitiveness, positioning, the shift to uniformity, competing on other people's terms rather than the way we began, where we were competing on our terms.
That's fine. Is there anything, I'm conscious of running out of time, is
Yeah.
there anything, and I realise that there are an enormous number of things, if this was a definitive history that we could discuss and I could ask you over a long period of time, but under the circumstances, is there anything that we haven't covered that you feel that I should maybe have asked you, that we should brush up, or that you feel I should be aware of?
I suppose the thing that needs to be noted, I've mentioned the strengthening of the research profile in the university and the contribution that's made by the sciences. That's important, because they've been the major research winners. The development of research centres is a characteristic of the 90s. The research centres.
Could I just interrupt there for one moment? You see that as a development of the 90s, but there were, over time, many research centres such as Anne Moyle and in the Science Research Centre and CSA.
I suppose the explosion of research.
Explosion of it, that's
right, because we had them. I was head of one in 1976 or thereabouts.
Yes.
The Institute of Applied Social Research in ENS was the first centre in the university.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. I just want to
So
understand.
Griffith made a national mark in that regard. I suppose the other thing that's important was we've always, no, I don't know. I suppose the key thing was that we weren't going to be constrained by tradition. Yeah. That sort of comes through over and over again, but we never rejected tradition. Well, there's only two of us left in the place. That's Colin McKerris and myself. Yeah.
Calvin Rose?
Calvin Rose is now retired. I retire in July.
Do you?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, well look, thank you very much for that.
No.
Unless there's anything else you want to add.
No, that's fine.